Pit bull.
Apartment buildings?
I mean, she was in the hospital.
That's not
I
Amy.
think which one she died.
Off of.
Yeah, she ended up with the
And they're just building it.
Oh,
There's
there's
another
huge
one
one.
off of.
I would not want to see that fight.
Off of
But that
Hamden.
was
when you go
It was
back
quick, I
this
believe,
year.
because you just
You
hear
go past that and I
By the
never
time
go
we
in there.
went
I
upstairs,
like
the coyote was gone. I mean,
It's kind of like,
the coyote
no.
was gone.
Are you talking about the
The
Emerson?
dog, you know,
I don't
that's
know.
the pity,
It's-
is sitting there
It's
with
big,
the
it's been,
hug and she's laying there.
but I never go back
This
down
was
in
just
there.
seconds.
It's where the,
It's by Craig.
Wrapping her up in
No,
towels
it's not by
and
Craig.
throwing, you know, running to the yard and they're like, we
It's
don't know
by,
how this dog survived.
it's where the,
Yeah.
there used to
And
be
they're
a
like, was it a fox coyote?
storage facility
Um,
and they tore
We
that
have
out.
everything, we have stuff.
Right as you come into Inglewood.
All
Oh,
the
okay,
Santa Fe.
yeah.
we're thinking the birds could have been a raccoon.
Open.
We saw that after that.
Okay, thank you. Let's call this meeting to order of the Code Enforcement Advisory Committee on Wednesday, October 15th, 2025. I'd like to start roll call and I'm going to start to my left here. Roll call.
Wow, here.
Say your name and
Rick, usually he says our name when we
that's
say.
okay.
Rick Somerset
Differently.
here.
Sonia Strome present.
Okay. Matthew?
Matthew Mitchell, present.
Edie Hughes present.
Linda Hart present.
Rick Emil Hines present and
Kim Wright for Reed Russell, President.
okay, thank you very much. All right, we have a quorum, so let's get started. To start with the approval of the minutes, and the minutes are actually the August meeting minutes because we did not have a September meetings. Any questions or any clarifications on the minutes? Okay, none being said, do I have a motion to accept the minutes as they've written?
I motion.
Rita?
Wait, second.
Sorry, Edie. 4 letters, same thing. Edie, second by Sonia. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Okay, that passes. Let's move on to public forum. This is an opportunity for the public to address the act. There is an expectation that the presentation will be conducted in a respectful manner. Committee members may ask questions for clarification, but there will not be any dialogue. Please limit your presentation to 3 minutes. Do we have any written comments, AJ?
No written comments.
No, and do we have people from the public here tonight? Okay, I think we're just gonna go 1, 2.
She signed up first, though, if you
find,
wanted to.
okay, you signed up
Fair.
first.
She can go first if she wants to.
All right, well, go with jump in. It doesn't really matter. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, go ahead. Yes, I wanted to lend my support tonight for the nuisance abatement that you're going to be talking about. And the nuisance, I have-
Hold on a second.
Oh, my name is,
For the recordings, can you
I
state your
forgot to
name,
say
please?
that, yes. Brenda Hubka, and I'm at 3639 South Fox, over by the police station. And there's 2 properties behind me that are scrapes, and they've been scraped for 3 years. They have the approval of the building department, they have plans submitted, but I have to call code enforcement every spring, sometimes twice a year, for them to come and get the weeds and the trash, and people are dumping there. This is right by the police station and the code enforcement. And what this is called a speculative buyer. And this is starting to happen more and more in neighborhoods like mine, where there's a lot of development, and in the north of Dartmouth here. A speculative buyer will buy a property instead of renting it out, which it was a perfectly good rental before they scraped them. They just scrape it instead, and then they sit on it waiting for the interest rate to drop. And when I know they're waiting for the interest rate to drop, because city planners have talked to them. I have talked to city planners about this properties. We have 2 big developer properties, by me too, that have also been sitting around for 3 years. But yet they have delivered other developments in Englewood by us over here by south of Hampton and over by the hospital. So I'm really talking about these small little lots where they come in, they scrape, and they walk away waiting for it to turn around. And we don't have a lot of tools to keep that from happening. A nuisance abatement could do that. It could at least hold their feet to the fire. You know, alternatively, I could ask council to pass a law that once you scrape a property, you have to now build your property. I think that would be tough to get by. I think that might hamper some smaller, legitimate companies that are actually wanting to just have a business at a time. The thing about the hallmark of the speculative buyer is that they'll have a pattern of using different business entities at the same address. For instance, the company that owns, and I'm talking about, I think the address is 3662 South Galapago and maybe 3682. They have a number of different entities all tied to them. And they'll have a different LLC tied to, and I've noticed it up here too. They don't own these properties, but there's a few developers up here north of Dartmouth of those 5 scrapes who are similarly doing the same thing. So anyway, this could be a tool to at least hold them accountable for things like people are dumping on these properties, mattresses. I've had a car fender dropped off there, and it is causing a lot of work for our, of course, I have to open an angle fix, and code enforcement has to go find the owners. See, they're hiding behind shell companies, so they don't know, how to reach these people. They've just got a PO box. I found them, but
That is 3 months.
yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Very much.
But that's all I needed, thank you.
All right. Any questions? Go ahead. Yes.
Well, is it just questions
You
or
need to ask-
suggestions?
You need to ask questions only. We can talk.
Okay,
suggestions.
well, I guess I don't have any questions, but I do agree with you. We do have, even in my neighborhood, same problem with the dumping, having to call weed abatement and all of that, so.
All right, thank you.
Brenda,
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Have you talked to the landowners at all, or do you always go through the city?
As it's a good question. When she owns 2 of the other properties behind me, and she built those out over 4 years ago, and we were communicating on Facebook. Because she backs to my property and we have a common alley back. And then she stopped responding about 2 years ago. And that's when she changed the name too. I'll just be honest, it was Invalesco Homes. Invalesco Homes bought 2 properties behind me, built those within about 2 years, and then they bought, the other properties came up for sale. And I was still on Facebook just saying, hey, when are you guys gonna build these houses? She went silent, and then she changed the name of this company and changed the name to this company, and same address, same business address. I have found about a dozen different names tied to the business entity at 1608 South Broadway.
So you've never said, hey, there's been dumping here and stuff like that, can you please clean up and, or?
Yeah, I
it's
have.
just
She's, like I said, she
nothing?
stopped
And
responding.
then that's when you've had to go to the city.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Are you mentioned that you've heard of other situations like this, Brenda? Have you seen or talked to any other people in the city that have experienced similar situations where you sense that there's a speculative property happening and that it's just a waiting period?
Well, of course, I talked to the city planners when this first started happening. They're the ones who told me that they reached out to the landowner, and the landowner said, we're waiting for the interest rate to drop. So that was in regards to mine. Then it was just about a month or 2 ago, I started looking for other scrapes. And so I personally drove around there, found 5 properties, took the address, and looked up, kind of see who's who. There was really among them only one that started to have a bunch of these different entities tied to their address. And a couple of them have already built something else in town. So it's not everybody doing this by any means, yeah.
Any other questions?
Do you feel like this is more of a city planning issue than a potentially chronic nuisance abatement issue, and why?
Well, I wish planning could do something about it, but they can't. All they do is approve designs. They can't enforce, there's no law in the books that says you have to build your house now. All they do is approve the design that comes in, send it to the building department, and it's sitting there in the Englewood IMS permitting portal. They have the permits. Now it just sits there. There is no law in the books that says you have to build. It could sit there another 5 years and there is nothing the city can do. It is true. There is no law that says you have to build your home.
Are you suggesting that we recommend to council that they have a law or create when people get permits to scrape, that they create an escrow fund, say several $1,000s that goes into escrow and they get it back if everything is fine?
Well, I think everything is, I think I like that solution too, and I've thought about going to council. But we have two schools of thought that I think council will strike this down. One is the very libertarian view that people should be able to do with their property what they want to do with it. You can't make someone build. Or also, I don't think council would be interested in discouraging development by putting out timelines. So that's why I like this tool, because at the very least, they need, if they're going to sit on this property, keep the weeds down, come by and pick up the trash, make sure people aren't dumping. It's a very minor tool, but I think it would be effective.
Don't building permits have an expiration date?
Yeah, I think they do. I haven't looked to see when their expiration date is. They did the demo right away, and they got that permit done. I'm not sure if they have a permit to build now, but I do know that their designs are approved. Like, they're not waiting for anything from the city at this time. When they're ready to pull the plug, they'll just submit, their form and pay their $1,000.
But you can't sit on a building permit without using it longer than a certain period of time, is my understanding.
Yeah,
So,
but they'll just have to apply again.
Any other questions for Brenda? Thank you, Brenda, appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
We next have Ms. Dickerson. Would you like to?
Okay, where I just state my name?
You can state your
then
name,
it
yes ma'am.
starts.
And then you can start.
Okay. My name is C.N. Dickerson. I'm at Bates Slogan. Government is instituted to protect rights, especially property rights. All rights are derived from the right to life, and our right to property is its only implementation. Laws are supposed to be simple, clear, and few. This amendment is none of those things. It is illogical and unconstitutional in many respects. For instance, it mixes crime and code violations as a justification for the nuisance labeling, has a vague and undefined wording, enforcement personnel and public official, adds an item for nuisance labeling of interfering with or resisting a public official. Who are enforcement personnel and public official? Neither label is or has a legal definition, much less authority or power of police officers who are certified and trained. Code enforcement personnel have no authority for warrants or access to private property. There is no employee of the city except police officers, and to a limited extent, the fire marshal, that has authority over private property. No public official, not a police officer, has any ability to claim they are being resisted or interfered with, as they have no authority to inspect or violate private property. No citizen has any obligation to allow any public official, including police, without warrants. No employee of the city except police officers can cite for traffic violations or arrests for misdemeanors or felony crimes, and until adjudicated guilty, these crimes have no bearing on code violations or nuisance property labeling, if they ever do. Another aspect of this is that statements that say 2 recorded violations, which include crimes as listed, justify the nuisance label. What does recorded mean? Issuance of a police report, or a warning or notice of violation or summons and complaint issued by code enforcement? Shouldn't it be something that was adjudicated? And how is it going to be adjudicated within 60 days? And it never is. Title 15 is already messed up, overly complicated, somewhat contradictory, and enforcement neglected in many instances. It is far from a solution. It is an additional problem constitutionally, logically, and according to individual private property rights.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Dickerson? Seeing none, thank you very much, both of you, for making your comments. And we'll move on. We are to the point of our new business, and we kind of moved this up so that we could allow people who are presenting to kind of have a time of not having to wait through other issues, so we're going to kind of move that up. The first topic is the Police Community Development Reorganization Plan, and who do we have to speak to that this morning? For this afternoon?
City Manager Lewis.
Okay.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. Appreciate your time tonight. I apologize that I can't be with you in person tonight. I'm attending my first Colorado Affordable Housing Conference in Silverthorne and getting good intel on our new, many of our applicants who are applying for our new Affordable Housing Coordinator position that we have gotten council approval for, among other things. So apologies I'm not there in person. I'll start with just letting you know that late last month we did reorganize in a number of departments, but the one that impacts code enforcement and that we wanted to update you on was the relocation of the code enforcement division into the community development department. So as you know, we're one of just a handful of cities in the state that has placed code enforcement in police over the last several years. I think it actually in our lifetimes has been in community development and police and gone a little bit back and forth. But we have made the decision to move that back, and there were to community development. There are a few reasons that I want to cover, and I'll try to keep my comments short so I can answer any questions that you have. But we were really looking at mission alignment for code enforcement, and just the fact that we believe that the mission and functions of code enforcement more closely align with the community development department than with police. Municipal code enforcement is really interconnected with building permitting, inspections, planning and zoning. As you know, our code enforcement officers enforce our zoning laws in the city, as well as work with planning very closely on sign violations as well. Code enforcement really ensures properties adhere to local ordinances, including health and safety, zoning, aesthetic standards, which are often drafted and presented to council by the planning and building division staff. So when we look at kind of the mission of the police department and the things that council is really wanting them to do and more aggressively enforce our criminal laws, we looked at where could kind of the civil portion of the department, which is code enforcement and also fire marshal's office to some extent, but where would those fit more closely? And we think that the community development department really is that place. We also anticipate that just from an administrative support and guidance standpoint, that the community development department leadership team can really provide that administration and guidance to the code team that can really benefit and support the work of the code officers. You may be aware, it probably wouldn't surprise you to know that our police leadership will all readily admit they don't really know the code enforcement world. Interestingly, all of our leadership and managers within the community development department intimately know and understand code enforcement. So there is really kind of a disconnect in terms of the day-to-day activities of code enforcement with the leadership at police versus the leadership in community development. So the building official, the assistant building official, the planning manager, the community development director, all of those in most cities, and including ours, have a lot of training in administering, enforcing civil and administrative codes like the ones that code enforcement enforces. So this really allows them to understand the tools, the training, the appropriate response that code enforcement officers can and should take relative to these complaints, more so than police administration. Also, there's a lot of similarities between the notices of violation and code enforcement with those notices of violation and stop work orders, et cetera, in the inspection area, the re-inspections. summons, the citation process, really, we think more closely aligns with the work of building inspectors for both the proactive enforcement that we want code enforcement to continue focusing on, but also that reactive and complaint-based enforcement. So second is really, we also wanted to make sure that code enforcement continue to have the tools that they need to do their job. We think it's important that they keep their uniforms that they've had in police, their personal safety gear that they've had in police, the radios, the ability to work very closely with police. So they're being able to keep a lot of that gear, and we want that to continue, including the body-worn cameras. So we wanted to really take a look at that. And then lastly, I'll just mention that the only staffing changes that were associated with this change was that we did eliminate the code enforcement division manager position. And that's really because we moved a division of code enforcement into the division of building, the building division. And you can't have two division managers for one division. It's a merged division. We've renamed the building division the building and codes division. And so there was a duplicative manager there in that position. So that position was eliminated. We also eliminated the lead code officer position, which was held by your staff liaison, AJ Futro. We eliminated that position as well, but we opened up a new code enforcement supervisor. And so we allowed any of the existing code officers, including AJ, to apply for that position. A couple did. AJ was selected to be the code enforcement supervisor and will continue providing the leadership to your committee that he has. But we also think that your committee will have a much more robust kind of support system with Shelley and Nancy and the administrative staff in the community development department with your agenda preparation, your minutes, all the things that place a pretty large burden on AJ. Now he's going to have that staff support that he did not have in police. So we think that there are a lot of good things that come from this, but we also just want to be cognizant of your concerns and answer any questions that you have. So I'm glad to answer those now.
Thank you very much, Sean. I'm going to open this up to the group here to ask questions specific to this. Rick and I had, after we found out about this, had a meeting. We met with Carrie Babin and the team from community development, and so we've had some of those answers brought to our attention, but we had questions too, and we may even have more today. So I invite anyone to open up, ask questions of anyone on the team. Any thoughts? Go ahead.
I have a question for Sean. What's this mean for this advisory committee? How would you hope this would evolve? Does our role change? Will we be paying attention to things in the future that we didn't pay attention to in the past? If it really works well, how would you envision it to be working?
It's a great question. I don't envision anything in terms of your functions, in terms of the things that are essentially requested from council for you to analyze. I don't think any of that will change. I think what will change is that you're going into a department that writes codes all the time. So they are always tweaking codes, going through codes, writing codes. Much of our Title 16 was written by people in the past, in community development department. The Code Next project, that was led by planning staff with support from the building division. And so you're being moved into a department that, unlike police, really understands those civil codes. And so I think that if you decide you want to, make adjustments to codes, but if you decide you want a new code, and tonight, the next item is an example of that, I think you're going to be supported, obviously continue to be supported by AJ, but then he will have a whole team behind him to really help with, editing, revising, hearing what you need, making adjustments to the code, and continuing to work with the city attorney's office to craft those. So I think from the code standpoint of adjustments into code, I think it's going to be a much improved situation.
questions?
How does this, guess I'm missing it. How this fits so well into, code enforcement fits so well into the planning department. I guess I'm missing that connection because this is not sending out permits and this type of thing. Where does this fit in? Because I am concerned on that.
Great question. When you look at what police, the main roles of police, they are dealing with the criminal code. They are issuing citations that are criminal in nature. Code enforcement has always been different in that they are working with civil codes. So when you look at the city department that deals with civil codes more than any other department, it's community development. So I know Assistant Building Official Babin is in the room. He could probably answer this too, and I'd invite him to do this. But when you look at the enforcement that we're already doing, whether it's the planners, whether especially our building inspectors, and let's see, anybody else in community development. But those two groups are really, tasked with doing, enforcing the same types of code as code enforcement. So there's an overlap there in the way you enforce, the way you summons, and all the kind of processes are very similar. And Assistant Building Official Babin, can you add to that?
Yeah, so similar to what Sean was saying, we too deal with civil codes. And honestly, a lot of our time together sort of overlaps. So we've always supported code enforcement, they've always supported us, down to the way codes are written, how they're interpreted, how to take a want and make it something that is actually doable for the community. All the way down to summons issuance and things like that, and how those are played out, court processes, things like that. We've always had a partnership that aligned with each other in the past. So there's a lot of similarities between these two departments already to start.
And who made this decision to do this?
Sean.
Who made the decision to do it? I didn't hear that.
Sean Lewis, city manager. The city charter. Oh, sorry.
With the input of the city council?
I did talk to the city council in the weeks prior to making the announcement to staff.
Okay.
If you, and I know you know the charter, but the charter doesn't give any administrative kind of authority to the city council. All of that is vested in the city manager.
Sean, what did you want to follow that up?
No.
What you haven't said that I know is a change is that it will no longer be called code enforcement. It will now be called code compliance. Is there a reason for the change in terminology?
Yeah, I'd ask Carrie to address that as well. That was something the Community Development Division asked about. So Carrie, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, so the intent of adjusting the name from code enforcement to code compliance is in efforts to be more, have more of a positive influence with the community, try to gain voluntary compliance before we actually go that hard, strict enforcement route. However, if compliance is not gained, we still do have the rights to apply those enforcement techniques strictly based on code and what we're allowed to do by right. So again, the name was to be, again, have more of a positive effect in the community and try to work with citizens versus going that strict enforcement route right off the bat.
Okay. Sean, can I ask, why was the code division put under police initially? Do you know?
Well, I only know anecdotally and by kind of rumor, but I understood that code enforcement became so contentious in the community. And this was years and years ago. It predates probably maybe everybody but Dick Patow in the fire marshal's office. But that it became so contentious that they thought, let's put it in the police department because then it's kind of like shielded behind, the police department, if you will. So that's what I've heard. That may not be correct, but that's what I've heard.
From what we found, the code enforcement transferred from community development to PD around 95, 97 timeframe.
So it was originally under community development and had shifted to police.
Correct.
Would this have coincided with the concern the community had toward enforcement of things like grass and weed ordinances and the uproar that sort of happened at around that time?
Can't say for sure, but that's a pretty good guess.
I would assume that that was intended to create a little bit more of the sort of intent to, quote, enforce. My concern is that this may be taking a step backward. And I think that just the sheer terminology to the community is a large difference. And I agree with the idea of encouraging people toward compliance, but I think code enforcement was in that process of doing that. I think that was one of the intentions of this committee, was to try to interface as community with the code enforcement division to create new compliance tools that would encourage it versus sort of, in your face kind of enforcements. So my initial concern is just the sheer wording has changed the nature of the committee and or the group, and I'll be interested to see how that plays out. If there is viewed by the community as in a different way. So that's my concern.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could, if the committee feels strongly about that, I don't think that there's any, we have not made any, I suppose, final decisions. I don't think we've changed uniforms or anything. So if a majority of the committee feels like the name change is harmful, we thought it would be a kind of a keeping with every enforcement tool and mechanism we're doing now, but with a more kind of positive and well received, by the community. We felt that would be, accomplished, as Carrie said. But if the majority of the committee says that we think we should keep it enforcement, we can do that.
Well, let me add on to that, Sean, if I can.
Sure.
I do want to reiterate that the enforcement actions from this group remain the same. That's not changing. We do still have a responsibility to the community to withhold minimal code compliance. That is what this team is here to do. So just because the name is changing, again, the functions of this group and this committee remain the same. So I don't want anyone to think that since we've dialed back on the name a little bit, that we're also dialing back on the duties. That cannot be further from the truth. So I do want to reassure you of that. Also, a lot of surrounding jurisdictions are also code compliance. So in partnership with surrounding jurisdictions, we do respond on an emergency basis as well. We are more in line with those jurisdictions too, in terms of, again, name, function, appearance, things like that as well. So just want to make sure that's on the table and everyone has an understanding of that as well.
May I ask a question?
Absolutely.
I'm sorry. Thank you so much. How long have these neighboring jurisdictions gone with compliance? And how did they rebrand?
Yeah, historically, I'm not sure. I don't know that if a rebranding for them has ever taken place or if they've always been code compliant. I just know that to current standards today, code compliance is a very common name for this group.
And has there been any feedback where you've been in enforcement for a long time and you've gone to compliance? Has there been feedback where it's to the public, when you go to compliance, the feedback it's a very negative sounding thing when all you've known is enforcement, and your code enforcement has worked very well with the public to do the things that needs to be done, and then all of a sudden it's compliance. To me, just hold my opinion, it's this group that I think needs the feedback, but it's just my question.
Yep, so feedback, as far as that goes, I haven't received any yet. I don't know if you have, or Sean, if you have. No, there's been no feedback to that.
Okay.
And I can jump in real quick too with sort of the name change. Code in general has really 3 designations that have been tried over the years. It's been neighborhood services for a long time, which has been found to be very broad and negative, because what is neighborhood services? That name used to be very, very popular in the early 2000s. That name has really gone away from a lot of jurisdictions. Some have held onto it just because of branding. Code enforcement, code compliance has sort of been the leaders of that, the remaining of the combined enforcements for codes. And then you have to look at it too of total responsibilities. Code enforcement has normally been more specifically towards the enforcement of some sort of specific codes or entity, where the sort of change in branding of what we do, because in Englewood we are very unique, we are responsible for assisting our public works team of enforcing right-of-way issues, traffic issues, foresight distance, our community development department, our building department, our stormwater for illegal discharge, those type of situations. But we're also on the animal side. Not everything we do is necessarily enforcement. We do a lot of public outreach. When we are out there catching a dog at large, there is a lot of compliance to that as well. A lot of what we push is the voluntary compliance side. But like Carrie said, we do have that enforcement capability. None of that's changing. We are still municipal officers. We're going to stay municipal officers. So we do have that enforcement where we can issue a summons if needed. But the compliance side is more of an overall umbrella, because we do have the park ranger for the park compliance side. Yes, we can do enforcement, but I mean, with the park ranger in the parks, walking, talking with the kids, doing fishing activities, stopping and helping someone in the parks, it's the code compliance is more of an overall umbrella than just enforcement. Enforcement does get that negative connotation sometimes, which can be helpful, but it's also very, very specific. So you do have like building code enforcement, you have rental enforcement, which is very, very specific, where code compliance is a little bit more of a broader term. And that's what I think in our situation can be beneficial because of where it's going with community development and building and that team and the collaboration. That so far the feedback we've gotten is it's been good. There hasn't been anything negative that I've heard.
Thank you. Rick, you have.
Yeah, I just wanted to share that I think that codes are essentially obligations we have to each other as neighbors. And so I think a move towards something like compliance is an important step when we're trying to engage folks in the process of both understanding and adhering to codes, as well as contributing their opinions and thoughts into the code process, which is what our committee is intended to do, is to sort of summarize that and present it back to the city council. So I'm not sure that enforcement or compliance itself as words, or I don't even know that I would consider one dialed back from the other, but I do think that the goodwill that Councilor Wright had mentioned in regards to the code enforcement team being out there and being good neighbors, I think allows for this to happen in a better way, similar to moving these meetings from the police department. And we want more people involved, right? I would love if AJ's only job was responding to neighbors who were interested in code and not officers who had to go out and do enforcement. So I think that compliance is a perfect next step in that process to bring more people in to have conversation.
I'm kind of the opposite.
But hang on, we need Matthew had to stand up.
Okay.
I think in general, my opinion is that I'm supportive of the name change for the following reasons. One, I think code enforcement does have a very deterrent-based sound to it, right? And I think before I was on this committee, as a citizen here for 18 years, when code enforcement would come through the alley, the first thing you think would be, oh, well, shoot, I gotta go, how tall are my weeds out in the alley, right? And so you have to kind of interpersonalize that. For me, interpersonalizing like this deterrence nature of the term enforcement, knowing that there are kind of what I've learned since joining the committee is that there is this carrot and stick approach to compliance, and that this idea that changing the name might sound scary because it doesn't have that deterrent effect that may be represented on the name on the side of the vehicle as it's driving down the street. But to the point that we're seeing changing in like community policing, right? That is more of a partnership, that is more of a, more of that carrot first before you bring out the stick. And if you look at the processes that are outlined in the Unified Development Code here, there are ways, I mean, there are compliance mechanisms here that are underpin all of the rules and regulations that we have. So that being said, I do think it is a rebrand that may seem a little more aligned with community policing and more aligned with the carrot before the stick approach.
I disagree with this name change. Inglewood needs a little bit more stick than carrot in compliance, because there are a lot of properties that are not in compliance. And the way that you do it with the, the warning and all of that out, that's great. If I see somebody in a truck go down my alley that has code and compliance, I'm gonna, oh, that's kind of cute. But somebody goes down my alley with code enforcement, I'm gonna pay a little bit more attention. And as far as doing community services and nice things for the community, police department does that too, but they're still a police department. And I do like the idea that it is code enforcement. That is what you are doing. You are enforcing the code. So my opinion is I think you need to keep the name. You're already doing one change in taking it out of the police department, and most people won't notice the change because they don't know who they're with anyway. But I think making two changes that to me take away some of the teeth of the code enforcement committee. I think that's a little step too far, just for me. That's my opinion.
Anyone else? Mike?
I think compliance is the right way to go. I'd like to remind this group that last year we had a communications subcommittee that struggled with the communications, that when notices were given to people about their high weeds, everybody freaked out, thought they were going to go to jail or get arrested. So as a group, we said we need to soften this. We were saying we want to be more about compliance and enforcement. Clearly, we were when code enforcement was putting warning stickers on people's back fence, people were getting upset because they said you're being mean to us and you're threatening us. So the subcommittee struggled with how do we communicate. So to me, we're just running around in circles.
But the communication wasn't the problem. The way they were enforcing it was the problem.
Well, we were getting feedback from people who got the nasty gram, or they took it as a nasty gram, that, oh boy, I'm in trouble. When in fact, that message was intended to say, please take care of your weeds. I don't want to belabor it. I think compliance is the right way to go. I think it's a good term, and I think it explains more clearly what we're trying to do.
Any other comments?
I have one. I think compliance is the right way to go as well.
Same.
Okay.
At first I didn't like it, and then the more I listened, the more I thought about it, it makes sense.
Okay. All right. It sounds to me like the majority of the group agrees that moving forward and having compliance as the term is an appropriate move. I appreciate the information that, in a sense, the function and the follow through of the group will be basically seamless in terms of the transfer between departments on this, and we appreciate that. The intent and the follow through will be the same. I do agree. We have worked very hard over the last couple of years to change sort of the public face of this group. And if this helps to move that forward, then that is a good thing. I will continue to express my concern that this may be viewed by some of our citizens as a step back in terms of how this happens, but that will be, the proof will be in the pudding, so to speak, of how we continue forward with this. So thank you very much, Sean. We appreciate that. Any other comments, any other questions regarding this?
Yep, two last things. One, that's part of what our job is, right? Our job is to make sure that people understand that compliance is shared as a way for people to be involved. So I put it back on this committee to be talking to our neighbors and explaining if there are concerns with the change. I'd also call for a motion that this committee approves or whatever the right language needs to be, that we acknowledge and agree with code compliance.
You're certainly welcome to make that, Rick.
Yeah, great. So I don't know. So I move. Okay. I'm looking at the lawyer. I'll just keep, as soon as she nods one way or the other, I'll just keep saying words. It's like a Mad Lib. I move that this committee vote to approve the name change of code enforcement to code compliance as part of the move to city development.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Matthew, second. Okay. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, nay.
Nay.
All abstaining, none. Okay. Thank you very much. The was approved and the motion was carried. Let's move on to the next. We're pushing time, folks, so we're going to try to get through a lot of this. City Manager, I believe that you are also presenting the next section of this.
Just introducing it, but yes, I'd like to give the committee background on this before our city attorney's office goes over the nuts and bolts. So a few years ago, council members, a handful of council members, began identifying a lot of issues with properties that had repeated violations. We knew that they had repeated violations, both civil, criminal, zoning, and other civil infractions. Many of these properties were vacant, and so especially the ones that they were identifying. So staff set about to look at a vacant buildings ordinance. Did quite a bit of work on that. It would have entailed an inventory of buildings, property owners having to register those buildings, and a registration fee that would raise money for an inspection process, that we would regularly inspect these properties to ensure they were in compliance with all codes. Ultimately, when we took that back to council decided not to adopt that ordinance. So fast forward to this year, and your committee, thank you, asked to review an ordinance like that, or something that would address some of these vacant or dilapidated properties. So you heard from Karen Montanez, our building official, our fire marshal, Mike Smith, about a policy like this. And I think in that meeting, Member Russell let you know that, yes, council had considered that. They weren't really keen on moving in that direction. But I sensed from watching that meeting that there was still an interest from this committee for, how do we deal with some of these, properties that are problem properties, like you heard in public comment. So I want to thank you for bringing this up, because this is why we're here tonight. Staff revisited this issue after the discussion with you, understanding that council felt that the registration process and the fees were going too far, and really have come up with something that I think is much less onerous, both on the property owner as well as the staff in terms of kind of administering this. But this is when we came up with this chronic nuisance property. And so we think this balances the rights of property ownership while really addressing some of these chronic problems we see in neighborhoods throughout the city. You may remember what we call the Bomb House at 4945 South Delaware. It was right across from Colorado's finest high school of choice. And when I went to Sam the police chief at the time, Sam Watson, he said, "Oh yeah, we've had problems here for years." And I went to community development. They said, "Oh yeah, we've had problems with this property for years." But there was not. I think it at some point went on the nuisance abatement team, which was really our only tool, was getting all of our enforcement departments in the same room and hoping that they would come up with solutions that would abate, and they've been successful. But we really haven't had a policy that, outside of just the goodwill of staff working together across departments, really would identify these chronic nuisance properties so that we could address them in a more coordinated way to get the relief for neighbors who are frankly fed up with the city not doing anything about these dilapidated properties that are causing tremendous problems, whether it's rats or we've had properties with people, entire campgrounds of people experiencing homelessness in a backyard. We've had properties with repeated that start businesses in homes that are noxious and create vibration and noise and things. And we have not had a way to kind of bring the full force of city departments together in a way that would quickly identify these properties and then address them. So I want to thank Deputy City Attorney Vicki McDermott, Jackson Higgins, our Assistant City Attorney, for the good work they've been done in producing this since council asked us for this in an executive session several weeks ago. And I'll turn it over to our great City Attorney's office for the details.
Thank you, Sean. I appreciate that. Nice to meet you all. I'm Jackson Higgins, Assistant City Attorney. Let me see if I can get this up there. You know how I would.
We have a PowerPoint. So
Yeah, sorry. Work through that.
Technical issue.
Perfect. All right, before we get started, not to completely reiterate what Sean said, but this is not an official recommendation. This is a tool that we have researched, and we provided you an example of here in this draft for, bill for an ordinance. And we think that other Colorado municipalities have begun to use this. Most of them that we've researched adopted this or something similar to it in 2024. And it's a way to address continual nuisances, as Sean was saying. So tonight we'll introduce the concept of what a chronic nuisance property designation is, and then what abatement process is that follows, how that differs from our current nuisance abatement process. We'll summarize how the other Colorado municipalities address chronic nuisances that we surveyed. We'll outline the policy considerations guiding an ordinance implementing chronic nuisance abatement. And then we'll provide some options for consideration that will need to be tailored. This is a very bare bones draft right now. Here's the general framework of a nuisance abatement. There's two distinct parts that make this different from our current process. The first is that this involves recurring violations versus one-off violations. And the second is that it can hold enabling properties liable for behavior occurring on their property. And that's under the theory that property owners are in the best position to control behaviors allowed on the property. One key distinction that we'll make in talking about this is physical versus behavioral nuisances. Physical nuisances include violations of building, housing, health, or sanitation codes, and they're often described as eyesores, health hazards, or blighted property. Physical nuisances are generally the result of a property owner's failure to adequately maintain a property combined with the property user's behavior on that property. And then behavioral nuisances generally include violations of criminal law. Descriptions range from, quote, bad neighbors to dangerous properties perpetuating or used to conduct criminal behavior. Behavioral nuisances are generally the result of the criminal behavior of a few individuals combined with the enabling behavior of all individuals positioned to prevent misconduct who permit the issues to continue. Not at all a replacement for our current process in handling criminal conduct. Enablers is the term we're using. It's been defined as people who are in a position to stop a chronic nuisance, who have, by virtue of their inaction, allowed the nuisance to continue. For the purposes of the draft bill for an ordinance in front of you, the enabling party is interpreted to be the, quote, responsible person, and that's already defined in Title 15. That definition of responsible party in our current code is broader than just property owner. And that would ensure that the city is holding the party responsible who is truly in the best position to mitigate. The responsible person includes the person who occupies, actually possesses, owns, or is acting as the agent of the owner. And that ensures that if the record owner is not the best person situated to work with the city on abatement strategy, the proper party can be identified and held accountable under the code. We'll go through a little bit of our survey. Out of order, we'll start with Boulder. Boulder defines a chronic nuisance property on a sliding scale, and that's based on the number of dwelling units. And that starts from one dwelling unit to the last one being over 100. The most restrictive strict quantifier for establishing a nuisance property is a property with one dwelling unit, where at least 5 public nuisances have occurred within a 12-month period. Boulder is somewhat of an outlier. Most codes we surveyed had a shorter time period and were therefore significantly less strict than this. Obviously, with the longer time period, with fewer violations, that provides more opportunity to be labeled as a chronic nuisance property. The sliding scale, however, allows flexibility and reasonableness so that a large apartment complex with substantial more activity than a single residence don't have the same standard. In the Boulder Code, the abatement agreement is used as a remedy, and that's assuming that the responsible party desires to find a resolution and be substantially involved in the abatement of a chronic nuisance issue on their property. That solution we think is ideal because it's cooperative rather than antagonistic, and it places the party who is in the best position to resolve the specific nuisances in the role of responsibility. If the nuisance is not sufficiently abated by the property owner, Boulder Code allows the city to collect reasonable abatement costs incurred by the city, either in abating the nuisance themselves or in hiring a vendor or contractor to assist in abatement. These reasonable costs are billed to the owner of the nuisance property whenever necessary. The authority is also granted to the city to place a lien on the property for the recovery of said abatement costs. On to Fort Collins. Fort Collins defines chronic nuisance property generally as a property where 3 nuisance activities occur in a 90-day period, or alternatively, where 7 nuisance activities in 1 year occur. Fort Collins separately defines nuisance properties for those with more than 1 residential unit under common ownership, where 6 activities occur in a 90-day period as opposed to 3, or 10 in 1 year as opposed to 7. There are also separate definitions in the Fort Collins Code that include a property where 2 drug-related nuisance activities occur in a 30-day period, and any abandoned property with any number of nuisance activities. The different bar for multi-unit properties serves the same function as Boulder's sliding scale. It just differentiates between those with 1 and those with more than 1 rather than a sliding scale. The higher bar for drug-related nuisance activities provides the city with an opportunity to treat those nuisances as higher risk to public health, wellness, and safety than other public nuisances. And the highest threshold for abandoned properties considers the fact that an abandoned property will not likely have an available responsible party and expedites the city's ability to control activity occurring in that space. Fort Collins provides the same remedies as Boulder, including civil action and liens on property for the recovery of abatement costs. The code also includes a catch-all provision that permits the city to exercise discretion when, for instance, a property owner is eager to resolve nuisance activity and take on the role of responsibility. This provision in the Fort Collins Code is stipulated alternative remedies, and it's dissimilar to Boulder's abatement agreement in that it permits any alternative solution that the city and the responsible party stipulate to. This speaks to one of the many issues in addressing chronic nuisance problems, that it is impossible to provide a blanket solution to issues that range so heavily. A property that continually presents a physical danger presents a relatively simple fix, whereas a property that continually hosts criminal activity or behavioral nuisances might require more creative problem solving, particularly depending on the nature of the criminal activity that occurs on the property. This is the benefit to balancing a flexible but still effective process once a property has been designated a chronic nuisance property. The city can adjust its approach based on the nature of the nuisances, the willingness of the responsible party to aid in the abatement, and the relative cost associated with providing a creative solution. Finally, what we'll touch on is Greeley, which defines a chronic nuisance property as a parcel or single unit within a multi-unit complex where 3 nuisance activities occur in 120 days or 5 within 1 year. Greeley also provides a separate bar for drug-related activities, and it's again 2 and 30 days, or any nuisance activity on abandoned property, exact same as Fort Collins. The key differences with Greeley are that each unit in a multi-unit property is assessed separately. 3 would have to occur in 1 unit, even if it's a multi-unit complex. Greeley also defines a chronic nuisance violator. That's another big difference. And that includes individuals and businesses, and it requires the city to maintain a database of names of all individuals or businesses who have been declared a chronic public nuisance violator. Greeley's code allows the city to take an action against both the chronic property and the chronic violator themselves. This has the benefit of creating increased incentive for those property owners or perpetrators who would otherwise be unaffected by abatement efforts at a single property or liens against a property which might not follow the individual. The potential detriment, though, of defining a chronic violator is the aggressive nature of identifying individual parties and possibility of creating antagonism with the party rather than encouraging creative and joint problem solving. In applying the survey of these cities and their codes, the intent of implementing chronic nuisance abatement into municipal code is to provide a tool for the city to first identify and record which properties are creating repeated code violations. And second is to provide incentive for parties in the best position to understand why the violations are occurring in the first place, to then work with the city in attempting to resolve these issues that affect public health, safety, and welfare. Each city attempted to provide some flexibility in the assessment of chronic nuisance properties and the remedies provided to the city. If the city depended solely on its ability to bring a civil action, for example, the instances where a responsible party actually had the desire to work with the city's code enforcement to abate issues on their property would be unnecessarily drawn out and less effective than a cooperative venture. The surveyed cities also addressed issues of equity by finding ways to carve out provisions so that code doesn't impact victims of crimes, exacerbating their situations further. And a lot of that's actually federally mandated. Additionally, the codes place a burden of proof and an appeals procedure so that properties aren't punished just for receiving calls without documentation of the nuisance activity, and that the parties who believe they have been improperly designated can make that argument to the city. Finally, each city had to create a procedure for providing notice to a chronic nuisance property and initiating the abatement. The available remedies are requiring abatement agreements that address the specific concerns at a property, public databases noting addresses, or in Greeley's case, specific offenders, authorizing the city's entry into a property to abate, civil action in the municipal court, including fines and/or injunctions, and passing abatement costs on to the responsible party through billing and liens when that's necessary. For our policy considerations, first we have public safety. That's why we're here in the first place, is to address properties that are repeated sources of public disruption and crime. And then also fairness. We want this to be a good faith notice and effort from the city to provide solutions in partnership when a responsible party is given a chronic nuisance property designation. So that's why we have a notice even before they're actually designated. And then the opportunity in the first place is to actually create an agreement with the city rather than going straight to any fines or punishment. For legal standards, we'll consider Section 9 of the draft ordinance that places the burden of proof on the city appropriate to either civil or criminal proceedings, and allows the court to take judicial notice of previously adjudicated nuisances when counting nuisances for the purpose of designating a chronic nuisance property. And then finally, an important consideration for the city is cost recovery. The city could be empowered to abate nuisances directly and charge costs to the property owner of a chronic nuisance property, similar to how they do another nuisance abatement. The draft definition in front of you, again, it's bare bones. It's just a sample. It's completely revisable, completely editable. Your option 1 is 2+ incidents occurring in 60 days or 4+ in 1 year. And then for multi-unit, similar to Fort Collins, how they separate between a single residence or more than one residence, 4+ nuisance events occurring in 90 days or 6+ in 1 year. And then your option 2 would be 3+ incidents in 60 days, 7+ in 1 year, multi-unit, 6+ in 90 days, 10+ in 1 year. Both the current drafted options include a carve out for sexual assault and stalking. Again, that speaks to not punishing the victims of crimes. And then a higher standard of any 2 drug-related nuisance activities occurring in a 60-day period. That differs, again, from Fort Collins. Really, I believe that's 2 drug-related nuisances in 30-day periods for both of those cities. And then a higher standard of any nuisance activity occurring on abandoned property. Again, completely open for revision, both the quantity of nuisance activities and the varying standards for property types if you wanted to create a sliding scale. The abatement process draft, again, completely open for revision. The current draft prioritizes giving responsible parties adequate notice and opportunity to cure, including the ability to contract with the city to establish a partnership between the city and property when taking ownership over the nuisance activity and finding a way to adapt to the varying issues that might be occurring. There's a warning notice issued when a property is at risk of becoming a chronic nuisance property. I believe the way it's drafted right now, if you have one more nuisance on your property within a certain time period, you have notice of that. And then your second notice of chronic nuisance designation, and that's served once the threshold is actually met. The owner response is required to submit an abatement plan within 10 days of receipt of notice. This is kind of a squishy definition when we talk about our abatement plan, again, because we're looking for a creative resolution to these nuisance issues. If it was a clear cut, this is how we're going to abate, you're just not doing it, that makes the city's job really easy. What we're addressing here is much more complicated. The abatement agreement is where collaborative measures are encouraged. Again, the city's position would be to partner with these property owners to help benefit them if they're eager to help resolve the problem. And then city enforcement, the city may abate directly only if the nuisance persists or if the property owner is unresponsive, if they haven't submitted an abatement plan within the required period. And finally, there's cost recovery. All costs for city abatement are billed to the owner and may become a lien against the property. For the specific questions that I assume should be brought up, first, is this something at all that the city should consider in the first place? That's for you to decide. Then there are thresholds. How many nuisances should occur within a period of time to be considered a nuisance property? And how should these standards differ, if they should differ, for multi-unit housing properties or properties that serve certain communities? And then there's carve-outs. Should additional carve-outs be implemented for properties serving at-risk populations? Finally, for cost recovery, should the city reserve the right to abate a chronic nuisance property and bill costs to the property owner? Are we comfortable with that? Applying the same standard we had before to chronic nuisance property. And with that, I'll open the floor for questions.
Thank you very much for the presentation, Mr. Higgins. I think we can just kind of go down the line. Are there anybody who has an initial question about any aspect of this? Mike, do you want to start?
Sure. I know the questions, I don't know the answers. I see two challenges. Maybe you've addressed it, but it's not. If I have a neighbor who is misbehaving on their property, they're throwing loud parties, they're obnoxious or what have you. I don't know if there's a law or a code in Englewood today that says disturbing the peace is against the law, or that you could get in trouble for disturbing the peace. But I have talked to people in Englewood who have had loud neighbors and habitually play the music loud and party. This one man tried to work it out with their neighbor. They didn't work it out. They called the police, and the police said our hands are tied. There's not much we can do. So my first question is, don't you have to have some type of behavioral definition in terms of, in other words, my neighbor says my music's too loud at 2 a.m. and I say, oh, that's just a cranky neighbor and my music's not too loud. So I don't know how you resolve that. So that's the behavioral side of this. And again, I don't know what Englewood has in terms of disturbing the peace at 2 a.m. But I know these things go on. And then my second question is it code compliance or the police department that actually intervenes at the 2 a.m. party or whatever? I mean, if the plywood is over the window, I understand that's a code violation. Or if it's an abandoned property, that's pretty easy to understand. But I'm concerned about these gray zones, behavioral. Sure. Who determines that the music was too loud?
Sure. So we have defined specifically, because we obviously don't want to leave this open for interpretation. We don't want a neighbor who's annoyed with his neighbor to be able to call and get them in trouble for what they perceive to be an annoyance. So nothing that's outside of the scope of the definitions of what is a code violation can be punishable.
Okay.
In terms of what are behavioral nuisances, there are noise violation ordinances, and so you could call at 2 a.m. that would be a public nuisance. If that happened 3 times in 60 days or whatever it would be, then I believe code enforcement would actually be the one responsible for coming in and saying, not just you're in trouble, but hey, we've had repeated calls about this specific issue. What can we do to help you address this? Because it's now become an issue. Is that?
Yep, thank you.
Question, distinguishing between a business and a property, example, a resident versus a bar or tavern, there may be instances where there are more frequent nuisance violations at a bar or tavern than there is. So is there consideration for distinguishing between those two, business and property? And then should there also be differences in the accrual of abatement concerns or violations commensurate with either the size of the business versus the residential? I would just note that. I'd be interested to hear how you thought through that.
100% yes. And so what we saw in the city survey was mostly addressing the difference between dwelling units. That obviously doesn't cover a difference between, is it a business, is it a bar, are these people coming in consistently? Do they attract people, right? Because the bar obviously would be more susceptible to things occurring on their property than a single unit dwelling resident. So I think that's 100% something you should consider. We would not want to uphold the same standard for a single unit dwelling, a residence, as a bar on downtown.
And one way that could be addressed is similar to how in the options that were presented when there's like a multi-unit, residence, that there's different numbers that would be considered before we meet that chronic nuisance definition threshold. That's something that we can consider with feedback on what you'd want to see for a commercial property.
Regis.
Yes.
Good.
I strongly agree with the ability to charge costs back for the costs of abatement back to the owner of the property. And I had a question about the city must be able to adequately prove nuisance activity to avoid punishing a property for merely receiving complaints. Well, there are complaints that occur with code enforcement, and those are documented. So is that your proof?
Just the fact that there was a complaint is not the proof. And so a part of this
I'm sorry, say that again.
just the fact that there was a complaint and code enforcement showed up to the scene is not proof that nuisance activity did occur. And so half of this is putting the onus on people who are calling, like then all the research on chronic nuisance abatement, they're called guardian citizens, right? So they're gonna have to be responsible either for calling code enforcement as soon as possible, so code enforcement can come and verify that there was a nuisance. If code enforcement comes and says, yes, we've confirmed, for the noise ordinance example, way too loud at this certain time, violation. If the noise is stopped once code enforcement is there, then we'll hope that these individuals who are calling have documented themselves so that we can confirm that it's happened. Otherwise, there's no way. Otherwise, neighbors who have a personal beef with the property can call however they want about whatever they want, and without verification, we'd be punishing them, and that wouldn't be proper.
Do code enforcement officers work at 2 a.m. in the morning?
Do code enforcement No.
No.
But the
So-
police do.
But the police do, and
And they
that
would show
would
up.
be
Yes.
legitimate verification.
Yes.
Anything else? Go ahead.
I think, well, one of the earlier citizens brought up around adjudication of criminal offense. I think there's something there that's really important because the fact that an arrest could happen or for criminal activity, you're presumed innocent until found guilty. And I think that there's a workflow there that needs to be consistent with that adjudication, with that court case. And certainly on average, maybe court cases take more than 180 days to process, depending on the seriousness of the crime. So I think it's important that we take that into consideration when we're looking at the cumulative number of criminal offenses, while also balancing that with sometimes that process is inconsistent with the victimization that happens. And I think there's some conflict here between the crime victim and the adjudication. And so I don't know how we reconcile that, but I think that's an important distinction that we should take into consideration.
100%. And it's not a full answer. It's obviously something that we would need recommendations and considerations from you all to address. How other cities have done that is having specific carve-outs for certain kinds of crimes where there are protected victims. And so if there's consistent domestic violence calls occurring, we don't want to publish or punish resident X who's the victim of this crime who lives at that property. So exactly to your point, the way that cities have addressed that issue is by considering crimes differently based on the type of crime and having those carve-outs. For mostly it's domestic violence, sexual abuse, those kinds of crimes.
Like if you're the owner and you rent out your home and the individual renting that home is a victim of domestic violence and is getting stalked, you as the owner that's kind of out of your control to the extent that you don't provide locks or a security system or other things that may protect that renter. So again, I think there's a little bit of ambiguity there in terms of some of the carve-outs as it relates to punishing the owner of the home in that rental situation.
Completely.
Yeah, so HUD, the Violence Against Women's Act, there's definitely federal and state law protections for victims of those crimes, which is why we have built in those carve-outs, because we want to make sure that whether you're calling the police because you're a victim of those circumstances, or perhaps you have an ADA issue and you're calling for legitimate medical issues, calls for service that are frequenting one of these properties, we want to make sure that we're not penalizing those individuals and those properties. So making sure that we are owners in a rental situation, that it's falling back to them would definitely be something we want to ensure we're encapsulating. One thing we also did encapsulate in terms of carve-outs is situations where there's a property sale, because we wouldn't want, for instance, someone that's coming in as an innocent home buyer to suddenly have the rap sheet of the property following them, and then them having to be in that kind of a situation.
Interesting. Is there data in the city right now that is collected or will be collected on these types of properties in relation to calls for service? So maybe my first question is, does the city of Inglewood have a nuisance property registry currently?
I thought you had a system that did track calls or violations.
Or
Didn't we
code,
talk about
code
that a long
notices.
time ago?
Code notices.
Engelfix, the code notices, calls to dispatch, so there's certainly record keeping, but as to a actual database, I'm going to defer to AJ on that. I don't know that there is something that specific.
I thought you had a system, another section, and I don't know if it's this time when I've been on the committee or the prior time that this was discussed. There was a system that you could look at a property and see the violations on that property. And another part of the city was using that program, and I thought code enforcement was going to get that. Am I wrong on that?
Yeah, so currently we don't have a registry of nuisance properties or anything. We can look up an address and pull a history for that, but there is no current registry of, if you will, nuisance properties. We'd have to search it by address and then pull up a history for that specific address.
Oh, okay.
So you can get the
That's what I'm
history
thinking
of property for.
on the individual property.
Yes, yeah,
For
we can pull up
code,
the history of
code
the property
violations.
through reports that are made either through police or through code.
Through
for
Angle
just the
Fix.
history of the property, but there's not a registry of the properties that have been deemed a nuisance or that have been issued nuisance violations or anything like that.
And this would create a registry.
That's one possibility.
Yeah.
It's a
But
possibility.
where would that be managed? Would that be within code, for instance, or how would that be administered, I suppose?
I think likely that makes the most sense. With that responsibility for managing the database on code, it would have to obviously include cooperation between several different departments, including the police, who would be responding to any criminal calls, and then code for any code violations. But then most likely it makes the most sense to put that in code enforcement.
Would that be available to the public, or is that an internal
The
system
way
you're talking
that
about?
Greeley did it, so that was one of the options, that's where it's coming from.
Yeah.
It's available to the public. And for them, it's available to the public, not just the nuisance properties, but nuisance violators themselves.
So the property owner name is listed with their
I
address.
thought that was kind of a good idea, but somebody made a comment, it was kind of like, no, that's probably not a good idea.
I mean,
It's a public record.
it is a public record, so it's something that would be subject to CORA upon request.
Okay.
Having
Okay.
it on the website, I mean, it's a balance, because, I mean,
But they couldn't just go on the Englewood site and look up this property and their neighbor had all these violations and stuff.
that is how Greeley does it.
I was gonna say,
Is
that-
it?
That's the public shaming.
Okay,
theory of
but,
this.
but
So,
Englewood would probably go for the Cora request, which is more jumping through hoops to get the information.
that's what I would anticipate. We do for our short-term rental properties have, that is publicly accessible, because we've had issues in the past with violations of those, of our code on that. So we do have that database publicly accessible. So it is a question of how we want to consider approaching it.
Okay, okay.
I've got a number of little questions here. I'm concerned with the vagueness of multi-unit property. A duplex is a multi-unit property, and so is an apartment building. How would those, to me, that would require a differentiation in terms of nuisances within that property. Has that been addressed?
It absolutely can be. And so that language was taken out of Fort Collins, the distinguishing twice, once between single unit, once between multi-unit. Obviously, there's some vagueness issues involved with that. So we could make that specification, and that would not be a problem.
Okay, that's one question. Why on the drug-related nuisance activities, why did you select to go with 60 instead of 30?
It was a blanket for you guys to see an example. So none of this was meant to be,
So this is not a
this is how it should
recommendation,
be.
this is just this is how we could do this. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Something else here. The warnings process, you said, we've danced the warning dance in code for a while, you get 2 weeks, you get, here's your warning, here's your notice of violation. My concern is that could string things out quite a long time, honestly. I think that there needs to be a little bit more of a sense of urgency. If these are considered chronic, then to me, that kind of jumps the scale a little bit in terms of how you approach that. What's your take on that?
So, and what differentiates maybe a warning notice versus a notice of designation is, I think, what you're talking about, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the warning comes before you're actually designated a chronic nuisance property. The warning comes where you're 1 away. And the next time there is a nuisance on your property, you'll receive a notice that you're now designated a chronic nuisance property. That's final. You're not designated chronic nuisance. Now you have to cure that as the property owner or the responsible party. And then you have 10 days to then give us an abatement contract or an abatement agreement. And that immediately starts the clock on. If you don't get back to us within 10 days with a proposed resolution that the city's happy with, and again, the city can be as flexible as they want with that, but it does permit the city to bring a civil action if you haven't responded within 10 days of being designated a chronic nuisance property.
My concern of the 10 days, and you mentioned it earlier in your presentation, is that if it's a physical thing that can be changed, you can find somebody to fix it. But if it's something which has to do with renters and has to do with, we have a process that we have to go to remove the renters from this situation, to me, 10 days could be limiting in terms of coming up with a real solution.
Completely.
But that's a plan. That, he's saying it's a plan, not the actual action.
Right, but even at that, sometimes the plan can take longer than 10 days if it's a complex situation. I'm looking at the side of the owner of the property.
And can I ask a question to that?
Certainly, thank you.
Is this via court order? Has this gone through the courts or is this gone through the city?
Can you repeat, is it a court order?
Is it a court order? Have we gone through the municipal courts to this? Or is it an order from the city manager?
Judge Jefferson has reviewed the proposed language, but with the understanding that this is all very much a proposal.
So we brought the judge into this for these discussions.
The judge has been brought into that. There are some concerns on the evidence threshold that sorry, I think I'm blanking on the way we called it, that he wanted to work out. So we are going to be making sure we incorporate the municipal court's feedback on that.
Yeah, because I'm looking at this whole thing and I'm the whole due process of this I'm concerned about, reading the entire thing. And when you're done, I have a couple of my own questions, please.
What other questions? Let's start with Linda.
Yeah. You've got a page and a half of type of violations that would fit under this. And I've got several questions on this. Some of these are criminal, some of them aren't. Some of them are civil. If I had adopted a Siberian Husky and he's an escape artist, and then I have weeds, am I gonna be set up for a abatement? And what are they gonna abate, the dog or the weeds? So this is so broad, and I like the concept, the basic concept. I do wish this committee had brought more into the discussion before you got this far. I think we could have added something to the discussion, and I don't see in what I'm seeing that this committee was brought into that to participate in any of the discussions of what you put together. I don't think the concept is bad, but I agree that you've got criminal charges, you've got civil charges, you've got all over the place as far as violations. That needs to be maybe tweaked into types of violations. And again, if you have multiple violations, what are you going to abate on? That's one of the big ones.
Okay, so there's a couple different questions in there. You tell me if I missed one, and I'll try and explain from my understanding. First of all, this was us bringing this to you for the first time. All that this is an amalgamation of the different surveyed cities that we had. This was our best version to show you guys. This is what it has looked like for other cities. None of it's close to final. All of it's for recommendation. The reason that this is all listed specifically, that comes from Fort Collins Code. The theory here is that to provide our citizens the best notice for what the bar is, what the threshold is, the rules are, the more specific we can be, the better. The reason that there's a mix between criminal and civil, and first, the more important question is none of this changes the process between adjudicating civil and criminal. Those are distinguished in their processes. However, the theory behind chronic nuisance abatement is that they don't exist separately in practicality, that a property that has overgrown weeds attracts behavioral nuisances, and vice versa. And that's one of the things that I read about this was drafted from Portland that did something like this 15 years ago. And that was their way of addressing properties that they realized, oh, this many civil violations have occurred on this property, and it didn't raise any triggers because we separated how we reviewed them, not the process for how they were adjudicated, from all the criminal instances occurring on the property. And so again, none of this needs to be something the city adopts. It's not even a recommendation from staff. It's just us bringing a tool up for you. And the issue with creating lots of different separation between, like, say, these are the kinds of violations that we're punishing, is is that the abatement agreement, and this answers your final question, which is what do you actually abate? It's so fact dependent on what the actual nuisances are. And so, for instance, we don't need the noise ordinance violation, for instance, comparing that to a dilapidated fence, for instance, much different processes. And so there isn't a one-for-all abatement solution that's given if you've hit this trigger of any number of any kind of nuisance violations. That's going to be between the city and the responsible party to look at what their nuisances have been and say, are they combined, are they related? Then we'll find one solution for them. Are they not combined? Did you just happen to have the dog issue and the drug issue completely separate? Then we'll fix those two, but separately.
Have you got that in here?
Well, they're not at that stage yet.
What I'm saying is you've got pages upon pages
There was
of
an
this.
ordinance in there.
Do you have any section in there to address that?
So the reason there are pages and pages is for identifying what is a chronic nuisance property. Now you're designated a chronic nuisance property. There is intentional vagueness, for lack of a better word, in the abatement process to provide the city wiggle room and the property owner wiggle room in how you address the specific concerns. The vagueness gives the city room to say, is this property owner, if he didn't reply with a comprehensive plan within 10 days, have we received notice from him that they intend on fixing this? Can we work with him in the future? Then the city gets to back off and say, all right, let's help them work on this. So that's why it's shorter on the back end on the abatement process and much longer on the what does it take to actually be identified as a chronic nuisance property.
If I can just give a quick example, we had a property a couple years ago where the property was completely filled with trash. There was criminal events on the property. There was even a death at the property from drug-related use. There were stolen vehicles that were recovered in the neighborhood. It was just a problem property. We were finally able to get in touch with the owner. It would meet the definition of a chronic nuisance property. At that point, there were multiple people coming and going. We didn't know who an actual tenant or person on the lease was, because every time we contact someone, it was a different person at the property. So that person would come and go. We ended up finally contacting the owner of the property, who was in the Denver area but out of the city, unaware of any of these situations. Their property management, who they hired to take care of the property, was completely not doing their job, which they weren't aware of. And so at that point, the property management company got fired by the owner. Owner actually worked with us, and that's where that warning for this process would help, because not everything that the police do, the property owner gets notified for. What we do, what building does, what community development does, the property owner at some point during our initial process for those first violations, they're going to get notified on. What the police do, the property owner may have no idea that anything's going on at their property until they get that first warning letter.
Okay,
So-
so this kind of fills in that space
Correct.
where the property owner, the police are doing something, and the property owner will be
Looped in
notified.
on that first warning saying, hey,
Okay.
there is something going on in your property. Now's your chance to step up and say, what's going on? I'm not aware of that.
Yeah.
In this case, once we got to that point, the property owner was notified. They're like, wait a second, this is unacceptable. I'm not okay with that. They immediately went to county court and filed for eviction orders against their tenant. That is basically where we didn't have this, so we didn't take that step of identifying as a nuisance property. But that's the example of an option of their abatement or an abatement agreement is to get those tenants out of that property to clean it up. They went to the court, the judge said everything going on, the tenant actually showed up in court and appealed the eviction. And at that point, the judge said, owner, you can't go on the property and touch anything. We got an estimate for the abatement, and it was gonna be $3,000 to $4,000. The city doesn't wanna hold a property owner responsible for something like that if we don't have to. That's not the intent. Again, we want that property to get in compliance. The property owner's working with the city. There's a legal process they need to follow through the county court for eviction. So they're working with us. That was our basically abatement agreement with the property owner. They had to follow that eviction process with the court. We provided our documentation to the county court for their case as requested by the county court. And that helped the eviction process move along a little quicker. They ended up eventually getting the eviction. The county sheriff showed up, conducted the eviction. Within 2 days of the eviction, the property owner was out there with dumpsters with the crew. The property was 100% cleaned up in compliance, and we haven't had a single issue since.
Okay.
So instead of us doing it long-term, trying to figure out other ways to handle it, this, in that situation, would lay out an actual process of how to do it. And that's what we've been struggling of filling those gaps, like you said. And that's an example of where this would have really helped.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Linda. I got other people here who are waiting too. So
Yeah, I know, but I
go ahead.
yeah. I can see being vague to a certain extent, and laws do need to be open enough that you can work within them. I think that section of all the different types of violations needs some work, so you're not getting a minor violation. If I have a dog running loose and I have 6 inches of weeds on my back alley, I don't want to be getting a nuisance property notice. And I don't think that would be fair. And when you've got good management, that's good. But sometimes you get bad people into positions of authority and it becomes a problem. So I want to make sure there's some protection there. And I probably got some other questions on this. This sounds like, and I was concerned because it was kind of like, where'd this come from? And it's so extensive.
Can I stop you for just a second?
Yeah, go ahead.
I kind of want to pull back from this a little bit because I think we're getting into the weeds. And I think that we have a lot of concerns, and that's good. That's what we're supposed to have, okay? I'm wondering if we need to digest this material, come up with some, now that we've had the presentation, come up with some specific questions, perhaps ask you back to address those questions, because I think that we're kind of swimming through this right now, and this, whereas it was presented in a timely manner to us in terms of preparation, we've also had 2 other things on this agenda that were pretty heavy too. Can we, Rick, do you have something that you would like to ask because you've been waiting?
No, the only thing I wanted to ask was the sort of the time frame for when, right? So you're presenting this information.
My next question is where are you going with this? What do you want from us?
So, we have an election coming up next month. And this is something that is particularly important to obviously our citizens, but we also want to make sure that we're not bringing something forward where one council, starts to hear the process and then another group of council members are on second reading, for instance. So, and I would also defer to the city manager on what preferences that he's heard from city council members, but I would anticipate that sometime after a new council is seated. But Sean, would you like to weigh in on that?
I think what you've described is accurate. Yeah, definitely. This is a very initial step. I think that I did get an email from council since the executive session asking when this is coming back to them. But I also know that, council understands that you all want to take your time with this, understand it, but also understand that I don't think council needs a fully formed ordinance from you all. I think that could be not the best use of your time because council is going to have their own preferences on some of the nuances that Jackson has presented tonight and the different options. So I would hate for you to spend, months on this and then council say, oh no, we want, these 5 other things. So I think what council is looking for you from, are you wanting to move this forward? Can you dig into the details, kind of flesh out the issues and concerns that you have, but then, forward kind of a general recommendation and come to consensus on the things that you think should be included?
The thing that I think is difficult with that is that we're seeing a lot of examples from other places. So I'm having a hard time understanding what I'm supposed to be reacting to. So in response to some of the questions that have been brought up by folks here tonight, it has been, well, that was sort of just a placeholder, or that was an intentionally vague because we wanted you to have an opinion, right? So I think it's hard, it's one of two things. Right now, it sounds like, I hope that there has been some feedback that will be taken from here tonight that is sort of part of the category of things we'd love to see included, right? But then there's also this request for, can you please review and see if anything is missing or if you have any questions, but I'm not seeing what we're supposed to be looking at yet that would allow us to take that step.
So this is the catch-22, and here's a fully formed ordinance that we think this is how it should look, and then you guys haven't seen it before, you haven't recommended anything.
Yep.
Or we give you the boilerplate.
I understand.
So it's exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So absolutely, I think we have plenty to work with. If you have more to consider, more specific questions or things you'd like to see, of course, that's what's helpful.
I'm going to come back to your original request for us, and that was, is this something we'd like to see? And I'm going to say personally that I would. And I would like to maybe make it in the form of a motion that we encourage the pursuit of this, that we feel that this is important, and that, you know, from there, the next steps, you know, we can figure out what we want to do as a committee in terms of coming up with, like Sean said, some priorities, some of the things which we do have concerns about, and we can present them back to you. And at least give you some feedback on those types of things. Is that what you're looking for from us?
That would be fantastic. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Chair, may I say something, please?
Go ahead.
You know, Member Russell will be here next month, and I don't know if you'll be discussing this. And we have an election next month, so who knows what will be happening. My concern and the feedback looking at this whole thing is, my questions would be, is city center or the city exempt from an ordinance like this? And what about businesses like King Soopers and Walmart? Because you know what? These businesses, city center, the library, for example, could very easily be shut down by an ordinance, because they could be considered a nuisance very easily. Look at Walmart, look at the King Soopers on Broadway, look at the things that happen at our own library. So I think that a lot of thought needs to be put into an ordinance, and that list that was a page and a half, 2 pages, those things happen. Behavioral and criminal happen in businesses throughout our city and at our own city center every single day. So whatever discussions happen need to be very thoughtful, because we could end up with unintended consequences because of it. We've already lost one grocery store. Could another one or two, because Walmart, be named a chronic nuisance, and I think that's something that needs to be thought about.
Thank you.
So,
Very good.
Go ahead. Would it make sense, again, I don't know the restrictions on the number of people, to create a subcommittee and put a tight time frame on that subcommittee meeting to review this, and or not, or is this better suited to all of our eyes and ears?
You know, I think I'm going to lean toward the latter. I think we're hearing from so many people in the group, and I think we've just kind of touched on this. Would you agree? In other words, there's certainly things that we as a committee would like to discuss. You know, it's bigger than that, I think, right now. So I would like to see this put into a future agenda, and giving us time to kind of process through this a little bit more, tasking us with coming up with questions, and just kind of developing our list of questions. I would like to motion that we initially indicate that we like this, that we're in support of creating this, and if we're okay with that, and then we can vote so that you know that this group is in support or not. Okay, so I would motion that we support the moving forward of the chronic nuisance research that's being done, and do I have a second for that?
I have a second, but I want to add something to it. I would challenge you all in a respectful manner to give us draft 2. As Linda has said, we've kind of got a mishmash of what this city's doing in that city. Could you give us something, a next draft, having heard what you heard tonight, so that we can move the ball down the road? So if we had draft 2, then we might be better able to look at draft 2. But I agree with Rick, I want to keep the ball moving, I think we're on the right track, but I would ask you to tighten it up a little bit and give us something to chew on better next time.
And
Does that make sense?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Who can we give feedback to while you're doing all this? Who is going to be in charge of putting anything together for a second draft?
That's the city attorney's office.
Is who?
Us with the city attorney's office.
Okay, so who would I contact? Somebody in your office?
Yes, you can contact Jackson.
Okay.
All right, very good. We have a motion, a second. All in favor of supporting this idea moving forward, say aye.
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 Those not in favor? Okay, motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for your time. Good job.
We are 15 minutes away from our 2 hours. And I am going to recommend, painful as this is, that we postpone Grass and Weeds until next month. I'm open to suggestions or reactions to that, because the other thing is we can vote to extend the meeting for another 15 to 20 minutes, half an hour, whatever it takes. Rick?
The postponement's fine. I do think, I just have some questions though about our work on definitions versus the code recommendations that we haven't had attorneys here the last time that we were talking about it. So I'm trying to understand what we need to be doing to get to a final version.
Well, let's go around. Extending the meeting.
Aye, favor.
Yes? Extending the meetings?
No.
No? Extending the meeting?
I'm open to either one.
Can you pick a side? You can abstain.
I'll abstain.
Abstain. Yeah. I'm open for extending the meeting.
I don't think we need to extend, I just wanted to
What?
question.
If you just want to make a motion, so you can.
Yeah, motion to extend the meeting. Second, anybody?
Second.
Second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, say nay.
I abstain. You abstain too. I just wanted to ask a simple one.
Okay.
I think we can address this the next time, but I just
Well,
wanted to ask.
we're either going to open this or not, so,
Okay.
I think we're in agreement that we need to open it
All
at
right,
least.
thank you.
May I?
We will,
May I say something? We do have a report on communications that was not on here, so
okay.
it's not on here. So
Oh, okay, you're right. I guess we didn't get
We
that on.
brought that up.
it's a very short report,
So
it's
just, it
still
would
a
just
little
be our
report.
comments,
Okay.
staff or whatever.
Um,
choice section.
Trying to think if we should move forward with grass and weeds right now and then try to get that in, or you're welcome to leave early. We have a quorum here,
No,
so if
that's
you
fine.
want to, okay.
I'll stay.
Okay. I'm gonna jump us then. Let's jump to subcommittee reports, and let's do that first.
Okay.
Okay?
All
Who's
right.
speaking?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do it. It'll be short and sweet. We met with Madeline, I guess it was about 2 weeks ago. And our task was to sort of get her input on, is there anything we need to do to update the communications plan? And from that meeting, she asked us to get her a schedule of topics that they would work on and possibly also for the magazine as well as for a utility insert. We both, Rick and I both said they are outlined in the plan. I don't see much change from that. So if you go back to the plan, spring is yard maintenance, property inspections, etc. Summer, weed control, outdoor gatherings, garage sales, fall, outdoor storage, leaf, yard debris, winter snow removal, holiday decorations. And then year-round is recycling, vehicle parking and maintenance. So if you see that we need to tweak those topics in the communication plan, get back to either Rick or I, and we'll get back to Madeline. Otherwise, we will tell her to continue on with the same messaging as we've been doing over time. So we are getting our own table and tablecloth for events. So we will have something that says, well,
You have to change the name now.
change the name, CEAC, so maybe
The table's
AJ,
put on
you
hold,
could
right?
connect with her on that to make sure that it's not ordered for C, that it's CECC, I guess.
CCAC.
CEAC, okay. We are gonna get magnets to be used by all the groups, buildings, utilities, etc. And also to ask AJ to send to Madeline who will show up from code enforcement at events for Oktoberfest and the Christmas lighting.
Any comments?
So
Any
when
questions?
is Oktoberfest? I don't know. Or has it already been? Nobody was there, right? I don't even know if we even have our table yet. But AJ, could you check on that? And then for Christmas lighting, when is that? Do you know? I don't even know when it is. And I guess I should look at it. If anybody wants to do it, anybody here willing to show up for the Christmas lighting?
Need to know the date.
Yeah,
Huh?
that would be real helpful.
Yeah.
We need a
Let's get the
date.
date by next meeting, yeah.
We'll still be ahead of Christmas lighting next week,
Yes,
won't we?
we'll be ahead of Christmas lighting.
I'm gonna make sure that you're on the agenda for next time. And
Okay,
if you will put
that's it,
together requests that we can then give to everybody ahead of it, and that way we can kind of be thinking
Okay,
about it. Can we do that?
yeah. A request for,
Just the timeline, what you'd like to see, booths manned or something like
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Uh,
okay,
And I will make sure that that's on the agenda. I apologize
okay.
about that. Okay, anything else?
That's it from communication.
All right, thank you very much. All right, Matthew or Linda are,
Christmas tree lighting's December 6th,
okay,
December 6th. What day is that?
Saturday.
Matthew, you want to take off?
Right. We started the weed subcommittee 2 months ago. Linda and I created some documentation that was presented to the committee regarding our research. It's included in the meeting agenda, approximately 10 pages. That process included a review of the current definition, the proposed definition, the issues with the current language. We then reviewed comparable comparative definitions from neighboring municipalities, including Capitola, Littleton, Boulder, and Arvada. We then came back at the end of the document for debate at our last meeting around a proposed draft expanded definition for committee review. At the end of that committee, we were asked, there were 2 proposed definitions on page 10. I'm sorry, on looks like page 11, the last page of the attachment. Section 4, draft expanded definition for committee review.
Page 11.
Page 11. At the end of the meeting, we agreed to narrow that down to one proposed definition. I did forward an email with that proposed definition to committee members that's consistent with the first definition. I'll read that definition. Weeds shall include any of the following. A, any plant, whether native or non-native, that is not intentionally cultivated or maintained and is grown in an unmanaged condition in a manner that poses a public nuisance, safety hazard, or fire risk. B, grasses or herbaceous plants, including both native and non-native species that exceed 6 inches in height and are not part of a designed or maintained landscape, natural area restoration, or xeriscape. C, any rank, unmanaged, or overgrown vegetation that obstructs visibility, public access, sidewalks, rights of way, or creates harborage for pests or vermin. D, any plant listed on the Colorado noxious weed list, or any plant designated by the city of Inglewood as invasive, noxious, or a threat to the local ecosystems. E, exemptions include native grass or wildflowers as part of a recognized ecological or xeriscape landscaping plan, or agricultural crops or pollinator gardens grown for food, education, conservation purposes, if properly maintained. But I think what sits in front of us would be considering that definition and making a recommendation or a motion that we formalize that as the new definition that could be then forwarded for review and approval by either the city attorney's office or city council.
Okay. Any questions?
Yes, my questions are on the process. So in terms of dealing with code 1561, which is the grass cutting code, is it, what we're looking to do, I think, is define weeds and grass in a way that is inclusive of community feedback, inclusive of feedback that has been around this table and the work that Linda and Matthew have done. So suggesting a definition update to that section of the code, which is 623 definitions and standards. Is that what we're trying to do, or are we trying to rewrite the code?
No, we're trying to update the UCD.
And do we think that that's enough, I guess, is what, like if we suggested that we would like instead of weeds definition, a grass and weeds definition, and in that place was this information, and then 1561 referred to grass and weeds, thereby defined in 623. Does that cover us for what we're trying to recommend?
Yep. If I could add clarification on that.
Yeah, please do, because everyone's staring.
In the proposed, in the proposed EMC 651 enforcement of the Unified Development Code and environmental codes, proposed definition chapter 6, cutting and removing of weeds and grass, section 15.6.1 has a definition that we're looking to update. There's an ordinance 98-39 and ordinance 22-2022. And then I'm not sure what that mark is, and then a 1 in parentheses here. So if we update the definition of 15.6.1, do the ordinance that support this definition then need to be updated accordingly?
That's something that we would need to look at very closely to ensure that we're not creating this Goldman language. So yes, that's something we would have to analyze and coordinate with any code update for this.
Okay. So I think the job of this committee is to provide a new updated definition in this document, and then that job would then be done.
Exactly. And then we turn it over to the attorney's office to be able to determine how that melds with what the ordinance currently reads. Is that correct?
And the, yeah, and the rest
And
of the
whether
code.
they, you know, they play nice together.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay. And then I guess how do we feel about the new definition? We satisfied with that? Do we have any questions about the definition?
I like it. Can I make a motion?
I like it too.
Before you make a motion, let's just see if we have any other questions to clarify from Matthew and Rebecca.
I think it's very clear. I
Okay.
think it's very, very clear.
Okay.
The only question I had was just on we saw a lot of variety between 6 inches and 12 inches. We stayed with 6 inches. I couldn't necessarily see a reason specifically to stay at 6 versus 8 or 10 or 12.
6 seemed, well, yeah, I think on the 6 seemed to be consistent with several other municipalities. 12, thinking about grass being higher than 6 inches is difficult for a lawnmower to push through, would be one example, but certainly recognizing that the Cosmo grows taller than 6 inches, as do sunflowers that are maintained in a way that's consistent with how that homeowner maintains their garden, exceeds 6 inches. So again, a lot of this comes down to discretion of the officers, and I think it's pretty consistent then.
Cosmos wildflower.
Yes.
No.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I feel is important too, alluding to that discretion, is that, you know, we're not overburdening code with the task by adding cumbersome language to this. I would like to think that what we're doing is just clarifying for the purpose of this document, the purpose for people as they are trying to figure out whether they have weeds or not. And there's a fine line there, there's a balance. So I think we have to just be careful how we do that. Any other questions before we move on Mike's motion? Okay, Mike, do you want to state that?
I would like to approve the recommended new wording as Matthew has read to us.
All right, a second on that?
Second.
Okay, all in favor of approving the wording as it's now written and moving this on to the attorney's office for clarification, et cetera? Say aye.
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 All those opposed? Okay, motion is carried. All right, thank you very much. Vicki, do you need any other information from us at this point?
No, we can follow up with questions.
Okay.
And then
Great.
bring it back.
All right, very good.
Thank you so much for all of this.
I'd like to thank this subcommittee for the extensive work that was done on this,
Yes,
all of the
very
research
much.
and all of the, the value of that information. Thank you very, very much.
Very
It was
well done.
excellent. It was very well done. Okay, let's get back. See, we got through it, guys. All right. Statistics time. Okay. AJ, do you have anything particularly you want to add to this before we jump in and just review?
Biggest thing, October 1st, our seasonal youth program ended. So our last seasonal officer finished up the 1st of October. And then our other seasonal officer transferred over to be our park ranger, middle of the September 26th, I believe. So you'll see our September numbers for the grass and weeds a little bit less, as along with the reorganization happened middle of September. So you will see some of our numbers down a little bit, just as we were actively moving offices and everything else. So some of our numbers are a little bit lower for September. But overall, they're still fairly normal overall, just with numbers in general. The averages through all the cases are about the same.
So no aberrations that you can, nothing that we should be aware of. Okay, very good.
Nothing crazy.
Yeah, I was looking through the numbers. My first thought was, wow, crime is down in the city. That's not the case. Can I ask you, how many code officers are active right now?
We have 3 code officers, a park ranger who's in training, and myself.
Okay. Is there expectation, I don't know what the number is you expect to have within code? Maybe Carrie, you can even address that. What is the optimum that the city would like to have in terms of code enforcement?
Yeah, good question. I do think that we would need one more FTE to really balance out some numbers here, including 1 or 2 seasonal hires again for the next weed and grass season.
1 or 2 in addition to the one?
Correct.
Oh, okay, good. All right, yeah, I think that'd be great, actually. Especially if this, you know, this new ordinance goes through, that seems like an extra weight load on the code division, so, okay, very good. Okay.
That does not include parking.
Parking is under police traffic.
Any question? I'm not going to do this page by page like we usually do. We don't have time. Any questions? Did anything that have anything that stood out? We're actually looking at 2 sets of numbers, the August and the September's.
That's just a quick question. Seasonal grass and weeds, not seasonal snow removal. So do we just, is that a priority thing? Or like we, anecdotally, right? It appears that there's a number of, as many snow violations sometimes as grass and weed violations that probably go unreported or unnoticed. Seasonally, it seems to me like another opportunity to make sure folks are doing what they need to do for accessibility and for people to be able to move around the city, so.
Snow is so sporadic, especially the last 5 to 6 years, that when snow is heavy, a lot of the code violations, the trash, those things are covered up. And so we can focus more on snow. Same thing with the park ranger. The parks are very limited because there's, besides sledding and fun, patrol those. Otherwise, we can bring the park ranger in to help as well as our Colorado sun does melt off quite often. So those larger storms, we do get out. We will do the enforcement. The numbers will increase. The smaller storms, we do see a pattern of we'll get out there. There may be a few of those properties that don't comply. Other than that, it's off within a couple days, and those properties that haven't, we'll get on. If you remember 2023, our snow and ice ordinance was changed to be more administrative, to where it's a first and final by this committee. So they do only receive one basically posting notice for the season. And after that, we do go straight to a summons for that property. So that's why the numbers do change a little bit, because the enforcement side on our side is less involved, unlike grass and weeds where we have to do multiple inspections a year. And that's something to consider with the grass and weeds as well, maybe for next year, moving on in the future, where snow and ice we issue the property. If they're in violation again, we go straight to summons and take care of it. And then if we need to abate because of the accessibility and the safety issue, we can immediately.
To tack on to that a little bit too, which we just discussed today actually, there's a heavy emphasis on cross-training within this department as well, so that we can use the time and talent of the park ranger to help with code compliance as well whenever they are slower in those months. So that coverage is maintained, if not improved, is the goal.
Great. Can I ask a question? Maybe we've asked this before. We have, I'll call them rent-a-cops. We have a service that comes through our area, and the little white cars with the little wings, and they go up and through Bellevue Park all the time, which I appreciate them being there because it's really a presence. How do they interface with code? How, do they bring issues to code? Do they report directly? What's the story there?
We are completely unaware of it.
You are?
Are you talking about Allied?
Allied.
Yeah.
What does Allied do if they don't interface with code?
We interface with them here at City Center. We very rarely hear of any issues that they're bringing from Bellevue Park.
It's not just a safety.
What are they doing?
I believe that's just more of a safety function than it is a code compliance function
They'll call the
necessarily.
police. If there's an issue, they call the police directly.
So I don't think they're out looking for snow removal or things like that. They're
So-
looking for safety.
Criminal.
They're looking for criminal activity only.
That's more the police side, that's nothing from our side.
Okay.
And the city's contract with them is managed by, I believe, facilities, so that's something we can find some more information about and follow back up with this group.
So the city
City manager has.
does rent a car?
Yeah,
We
the
hired
Lions.
Allied, that's the
Allied.
security, Sean would probably like to opine on.
Sean, you
this.
wanna help us?
Sure.
You wanna help me?
Correct. You've seen Allied in Bellevue Park, and that's because when we have the farm and train open and we have the barn at the farm, we have staff out there, and so we actually put in their post orders that they do make a kind of a run through for those facilities, and I think they might actually also drive by and patrol a little bit at Pirates Cove, but I know for sure they do that for farm and train.
Okay. Clarifies it a bit. Thank you. Last comment, I've noticed that there seems to be some additional parks on this report. Navajo Retention, Pirates Cove is on here. Is that new? They weren't on the.
Those have been on all year.
Have they? Oh,
Yes.
Did I not notice them? Oh, they weren't on from last year. I was comparing to
Correct.
last year.
Yeah.
Got it. All right. Any other questions about the report? Okay, moving on. Almost there, guys. Council members' choice. Member Wright, what do you have to say? Anything?
I was given no directions.
Okay. We thank you for being here as their representative. City Attorney's choice.
I think you've heard a lot from us tonight. We don't have anything further. Thank you.
Commissioner's choice. Anything anybody wants to say that they haven't already said?
The new room recommendation.
Yes. Do you want to address the room change here? And it's not going to happen, is it going to happen next month or is it going to happen?
We are going to try to push it for next month.
Okay.
So with scheduling and that, it will be after the election, so the community room should be available. Just to coordinate a little bit better with other board and commission meetings, with staffing. We're going to try to move this meeting to the community room, which will be a little bit bigger, especially for public comment. And then it coordinates a little bit better with other board and commission meetings happening tonight as well. And so this meeting, hopefully next month, will be moved to the community room. So keep an eye out on the agenda and the email that comes out. If that change does happen, that will be noted. And then it will be just a community room on the second floor.
Okay.
Fewer stairs.
Fewer stairs. We don't have to worry about somebody letting us in.
Yeah.
Next month, I have bylaws down and it is time. We haven't really reviewed the bylaws for quite a while. And so we'll make sure that you've got them. You sent them already, didn't you? Everybody's got the bylaws. Okay, so you have, just take a look through them. We need to really discuss one thing, which is the name of the group. And somebody already mentioned that, is, do we change that? And it's so nice being able to say SEAC, and I'm not sure I'm gonna be able to say CAC. So we'll have to figure that one out. But there are a couple other issues that I will bring up that I would like to see changed in the bylaws, but if you have any recommendations, great. Do we want to put a further discussion of the nuisance issue on the agenda? Would you feel comfortable moving forward on that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, let's put that on the agenda for next time. Also, let's plan on coming with personal questions that we have after we've reviewed it, and we can open up with that. If we could have a representative from your group here again, that would be ideal. Absolutely. Appreciate it. Okay, anything else for tonight?
Next month, I will not be here, but there will be someone here. For December, if we could discuss next month as well, if we're going to have that meeting for December. Otherwise, it will be January, will be the next meeting.
Okay. There is discussion that we might skip. I think we've done our yeoman's work here, and it's been a good year, but we might want to just take December off. So we'll talk about that and see what we get to next.
I believe council had brought that up because council is on vacation at the end of December, and I had requested that any meetings when council's on break that not happen, and I believe that was approved by council.
I I believe you're right, and yeah, any meeting where there is a council liaison present, so that way it is a true break for council members. And I believe you're right about that. I would have to just follow up with the clerk's office on where that has been, where that's landed with you guys.
And I believe if Sean's still on, I believe there was discussion of a true break where there was no meetings in December unless by some type of charter, they have to happen. I don't know where we
Thank you.
ended with that.
Thank you, Member Wright. Yes, the charter does require you to meet twice per month, which is why even is it June or July that we take kind of the summer break, we still have to have those 2 meetings at either end or at the first or the beginning of the month because charter does require it. We have historically canceled, I think, 1 meeting in December, but in my 6 years here, we have had at least a couple of meetings in December, so.
Right, but weren't we trying with all the boards and commissions, trying to give everybody the break for the month of December? Wasn't it P and Z that has to meet by charter also? But everyone else we were trying, we could talk about it. Okay.
Yeah, Deputy City Attorney probably knows that better than I do.
You let us know. No, that sounds good. Any other points of discussion? Otherwise, we're adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody. Good meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you.
Is this your copy or is this an extra?
That was just here.
Okay. Did you have a copy of this? This is what we went through too.